My ex-wife bragged about my downfall, my quiet revenge left her facing a jail sentence. The air in the high-ceilinged, overly ornate ballroom was thick, almost cloying, with the clinking of champagne flutes and the murmur of polite society, a soundscape designed to mask the quiet hum of ambition and veiled judgment. Seraphina, draped in a gown that shimmered with every calculated movement, a cascade of emerald silk that caught the light and magnified her presence, held court at the very center of a captivated, almost mesmerized circle. Her laughter, a brittle, high-pitched sound that seemed to splinter the ambient noise, carried a triumphant echo that reached every corner of the room, vibrating against the gilded cornices and polished marble. "Can you believe it, darling?" she purred, her voice a theatrical whisper, addressing a woman whose eyes were wide with a perfectly feigned sympathy and an almost palpable, genuine curiosity. "Rhys, my once illustrious ex-husband, utterly ruined. His company, that grand edifice he so painstakingly built with his own 2 hands, reduced to dust. A spectacular, quite frankly, pathetic collapse." A collective sigh, a peculiar blend of manufactured pity and barely concealed schadenfreude, rippled through her audience, a wave of satisfaction that Seraphina visibly savored. Her gaze swept over the faces before her, lingering just a fraction too long on a few who had once praised Rhys's ingenuity, their past compliments now a bitter irony in the opulent air. She was performing, and she was doing it brilliantly, a master of her own narrative. Each word was a carefully aimed arrow, polished and sharpened, designed to puncture any lingering vestiges of Rhys's reputation, to cement her narrative of his utter, unequivocal failure in the minds of these influential onlookers. "He always was a dreamer," she continued, her voice dripping with mock compassion, a saccharine sweetness that belied the venom in her words, but ambition, unchecked by practicality, ungrounded in the harsh realities of the market, leads only to this. A cautionary tale, wouldn't you say? Her eyes sparkled with a triumphant gleam, reflecting the crystal chandeliers above. Across the room, near a less frequented alcove adorned with wilting floral arrangements, their vibrant colors muted by the dim light, Rhys stood. A glass of water, condensation beating on its surface, remained untouched in his hand. His posture was relaxed, almost unnervingly so, given the public spectacle unfolding before him, a stark contrast to the agitated energy that permeated the room. He observed Seraphina's performance with an expression that was neither angry nor defeated, but rather, one of quiet, almost scientific interest, as if studying a complex, yet predictable, phenomenon. A faint, almost imperceptible curve touched the corner of his lips, not a smile of amusement, but something far more complex, something akin to a silent acknowledgement of a meticulously executed plan. It was the subtle sign of a man who held a secret, a profound truth meticulously guarded beneath layers of manufactured calm, a serenity born of long-held resolve. He heard every word Seraphina uttered, every cruel jest, every public declaration of his downfall. The sting of her words, once capable of lacerating his spirit and piercing his very core, now merely brushed against a surface hardened by years of quiet resolve, by countless nights of meticulous preparation. He knew what she didn't. This public degradation, this carefully orchestrated humiliation, was merely the prelude, a grand opening act for a play she had no idea she was starring in. The true act, the one for which he had spent years preparing, refining every detail, was about to begin. The Zeigarnik effect was in full play. Seraphina believed her story was complete, her triumph absolute, but Rhys knew it was just the first, incomplete chapter of a much larger, far more intricate narrative. The audience, if they had only known, were not witnessing the end of a story, a final curtain call for a failed entrepreneur, but the meticulously planned beginning of another, far more devastating one for the victor. His quiet composure, amidst the storm of Seraphina's triumph, was the first hook, a silent promise of an untold truth. What could possibly make a man, publicly shamed, stripped of his life's work, stand so utterly serene, so disconnected from the very narrative being woven around him? This unanswered question, this nascent curiosity gap, was the very foundation upon which his quiet revolution was built, a silent challenge to the perceived reality. To truly understand Rhys's tranquility, his almost unnerving calm in the face of such calculated public scorn, one must delve into the intricate tapestry of his past, a narrative woven with threads of aspiration, profound betrayal, and an enduring, almost relentless patience that bordered on the obsessive. Rhys and Seraphina had met in their early 20s, a whirlwind romance that ignited in the vibrant, chaotic world of a tech startup incubator, a romance Rhys had genuinely believed was born of shared ambition and a mutual passion for innovation. He was a brilliant, self-taught tech visionary, fueled by an almost spiritual belief in the transformative power of innovation, seeing technology not just as code and circuits, but as a force for positive societal change. Seraphina, with her captivating charm, her effortless grace, and impeccable social graces, seemed to be the perfect complement, the dazzling public face to his quiet genius, the bridge between his intricate algorithms and the world. Their early years were a blur of shared dreams, long nights prototyping in their cramped apartment filled with the smell of instant coffee and soldering fumes, and the exhilarating thrill of launching Synapse Solutions, a company built entirely on Rhys's revolutionary AI algorithms, designed to streamline complex data processing. Rhys poured every fiber of his being, every ounce of his intellect and energy, into Synapse. His life was the company, its growth, its potential to genuinely change how people interacted with technology, to make information more accessible, more intuitive. He worked 16-hour days, often fueled by sheer willpower, reinvested every spare penny, every bonus, and made personal sacrifices that would astonish most. He deferred his own salary for years, living frugally on the bare minimum, while meticulously ensuring his employees were well compensated, even during challenging periods. He liquidated personal assets, even a small, cherished inheritance from his grandmother that he had earmarked for a modest home, to cover operational costs during lean periods, prioritizing the company's survival above his personal comfort. His focus was always on the long game, the ethical development of technology, and the welfare of his team, whom he regarded as family. He believed fiercely in meritocracy, in building something genuinely valuable, something that would stand the test of time. He saw Synapse not just as a business, a means to generate wealth, but as a legacy, a testament to what dedication, vision, and uncompromising integrity could achieve. Seraphina, however, saw something entirely different. She saw Synapse not as a shared dream or a legacy, but as a conduit, a means to an end, a glittering vehicle for her own personal enrichment and social ascent. While Rhys toiled in the quiet solitude of server rooms and coding chambers, wrestling with complex algorithms and debugging lines of code, she cultivated their public image, hosted lavish client dinners in Michelin-starred restaurants, and seamlessly navigated the intricate, often cutthroat, social circles of the tech elite. At first, Rhys admired her prowess, her effortless ability to charm and connect, genuinely believing it was an essential part of their shared success, the yin to his yang. He trusted her implicitly, granting her significant control over the company's financial operations and marketing budget, believing she possessed a practical acumen he lacked. He was a creator, she was a connector. He genuinely thought they were a perfect, symbiotic pair, two halves of a whole, building an empire together. The first cracks in their polished facade began to appear subtly, like hairline fractures in a priceless vase. Seraphina's expenses, once justifiable as business development, networking events, industry conferences, escalated dramatically, acquiring a new, almost dizzying scale. Designer clothes, exotic vacations to private islands, custom-made jewelry, all justified as necessary for maintaining their public profile, for projecting an image of success that would attract top-tier talent and investors. Rhys, engrossed in his coding and product development, his mind consumed by the next innovation, initially dismissed these as the unavoidable costs of their rising success, the price of playing in the big leagues. He trusted her judgment implicitly, her smooth declarations that these expenditures were strategic investments, essential for projecting an image of power and stability in the cutthroat tech world. "Perception is everything, Rhys," she would coo, her fingers gently stroking his hair after a particularly grueling coding session, her voice a soothing balm, and a strong perception allows us to secure better deals, attract better talent. "You handle the genius, I'll handle the glitz." He wanted to believe her, desperately wanted to believe in the perfect partnership they had forged, the shared destiny he envisioned. But the subtle unease began to gnaw at him, a persistent, low-level thrum of dissonance beneath the surface of his contentment. He noticed discrepancies in expense reports that were just a little too neat, vendor invoices that seemed slightly inflated for the services rendered, and a persistent, almost casual, vagueness whenever he inquired about specific financial allocations. He'd ask about a particularly large payment to a nebulous, consulting firm he didn't recognize, and Seraphina would wave a dismissive hand, her bracelets jingling, "Oh, darling, just the usual. Networking, industry connections. Don't burden your brilliant mind with such mundane details. Focus on the algorithms, the real work." Her charm, once so captivating, so disarming, began to feel like a veil, subtly obscuring something he couldn't quite grasp, a barrier between him and the truth. The turning point, the moment the hairline cracks fractured into gaping chasms, came during a pivotal funding round for Synapse Solutions. A major institutional investor, known for their meticulous due diligence, raised serious concerns about the disproportionately high operational overhead compared to similar, rapidly scaling startups. Rhys, presenting the technical roadmap, the heart of his vision, was blindsided, utterly unprepared. He had always focused on the product, on the ethical integrity of their technology, assuming the finances were sound under Seraphina's seemingly meticulous care. When he pressed her for detailed explanations, for transparent documentation, her usual charming evasiveness hardened into sharp defensiveness, then outright, venomous anger. "Are you accusing me, Rhys?" she spat, her eyes flashing with a cold, almost reptilian fury he hadn't seen before, her voice laced with incredulity. "After everything I've done for us? For your company?" Her reaction, so disproportionate to his simple, legitimate request for clarification, ignited a flicker of suspicion, a tiny ember of doubt that slowly, inexorably, grew into a consuming, terrifying fire within him. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was profoundly, irrevocably wrong. Driven by an innate need for truth, an almost pathological requirement for clarity, and a growing, desperate fear for the company he had poured his soul into, Rhys began, quietly and meticulously, to investigate. He used his formidable technical skills, not to hack or illegally infiltrate, but to trace the digital footprints of their company's transactions, cross-referencing public records, analyzing spending patterns that Seraphina had designed to appear legitimate. It was a painstaking, clandestine operation, conducted late at night in his home office, long after Seraphina had retired to her separate bedroom, the only sounds the quiet hum of his server and the frantic tapping of his keyboard. He installed discrete monitoring software on company devices she used, not to spy on personal communications, but to log financial transactions and document the paper trail. He set up secure, encrypted cloud storage for every document, every email, every suspicious invoice he found. He even went as far as creating an anonymous digital paper trail, using a series of proxies and encrypted channels, to discreetly verify the existence of some of the consulting firms Seraphina claimed to work with, only to find many were shell corporations, registered to vacant lots or post office boxes, or simply non-existent entities. What he uncovered over 2 agonizing years was a meticulously constructed web of fraud and embezzlement, a spider's lair of deceit. Seraphina wasn't just spending lavishly, she was systematically siphoning funds from Synapse Solutions, creating dummy invoices, diverting client payments into her own accounts, and inflating vendor contracts by staggering amounts. She had set up a complex network of shell companies to funnel money into offshore accounts, laundered through a dizzying array of seemingly legitimate transactions that made them nearly untraceable to the untrained eye. The lavish lifestyle she paraded, the one he had tolerated as a cost of business, was not funded by Synapse's legitimate profits, but by its slow, calculated bleed, by the systematic theft of its very lifeblood. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow, leaving him breathless. The love, the partnership, the shared dream, it had all been a performance, a grand illusion designed to extract his resources. He was not a partner, he was a mark, an unsuspecting source of her illicit wealth. The evidence he gathered over those 2 agonizing years was overwhelming, a crushing weight of undeniable proof, meticulously documented financial records, irrefutable digital footprints, and even chilling audio recordings of Seraphina subtly coercing junior employees to sign off on dubious expenses, their voices laced with discomfort. He collected witness statements from former disgruntled employees who had been quietly dismissed for asking too many questions, for showing too much curiosity about the company's opaque financials. He built a comprehensive case, an irrefutable narrative of her deep-seated criminality, a story told in numbers and transactions. This, he realized, was his secret weapon, not a single piece of information, but a vast, interconnected network of undeniable proof, each piece interlocking with the next. He consulted, discreetly, with a forensic accountant he trusted implicitly, a former professor named Arthur Vance, who helped him identify the sophisticated layers of Seraphina's financial deception, the cunning behind her schemes. Arthur confirmed his worst fears: Seraphina's activities weren't just unethical, they were profoundly criminal, crossing multiple jurisdictions and involving international money laundering. Rhys endured their failing marriage, the emotional distance that became an icy chasm between them, and her escalating contempt for him, all while silently gathering the ammunition he would one day need. He knew that confronting her prematurely would be disastrous. She was too cunning, too ruthless. She would simply destroy the evidence and blame him, twisting the narrative to her advantage. He needed an ironclad case, one that would stand up to any scrutiny, any legal challenge, any attempt to discredit him. He understood that patience was his most potent weapon, and quiet observation his most effective shield against her machinations. He allowed her to believe she was untouchable, that her machinations were invisible to him, that he was too naive, too absorbed in his coding to ever suspect her. He cultivated an image of a man too absorbed in his work, too naive to understand the true nature of the world, too trusting. This deliberate feigned ignorance, a calculated vulnerability, was part of his long-term strategy, a cunning psychological ploy. He was preparing not just for vindication, but for an absolute, undeniable exposure, a reckoning that would shatter her world. The only question that remained was how and when to deploy it, a question he pondered ceaselessly. He waited for the opportune moment, a moment when Seraphina's own hubris, her overwhelming arrogance, would serve as the unwitting catalyst for her undoing. He knew she would eventually overplay her hand, would push her luck too far, and when she did, he would be ready, poised to strike. The eventual collapse of Synapse Solutions, though painful and heartbreaking, was merely the final piece of the puzzle, a devastating event that, in Seraphina's mind, cemented his failure, but in Rhys's strategic vision, served as the perfect, unassailable platform for her grand, public reckoning. As Seraphina's public declarations of Rhys's downfall reached a fever pitch, her voice ringing with fabricated victory across the city's elite circles, Rhys began to move. His actions were as quiet and precise as the ticking mechanism of a masterfully crafted clock, each movement calculated to achieve maximum impact at the appointed hour, each component perfectly aligned. There were no dramatic confrontations, no angry outbursts, no desperate pleas for understanding, no futile attempts to correct her narrative. He understood that Seraphina thrived on external validation and conflict. Denying her these reactions only fueled her arrogance, making her more complacent, more comfortable, and therefore more vulnerable to the elaborate trap he was laying. His silence was not weakness, it was a deliberate, strategic void designed to draw her further into her own delusion of invincibility, to make her believe her triumph was absolute. His first moves were largely invisible to the casual observer, even to Seraphina herself, who was too consumed by her own fabricated glory to notice the subtle currents beneath the surface. While she was busy broadcasting his ruin across her social networks and whispering circles, carefully cultivating the image of the triumphant survivor, Rhys was quietly securing his legal team. He engaged the services of a highly discreet and respected law firm specializing in corporate fraud and white-collar crime, a firm known for their meticulous preparation and their unwavering pursuit of justice. He didn't just walk in with a vague suspicion, he arrived with his meticulously compiled evidence, a comprehensive dossier that left no room for doubt, a narrative of deceit told in cold, hard facts. The senior partner, a stoic woman named Eleanor Vance, known for her sharp intellect and impenetrable composure, Arthur's sister, a connection established by the forensic accountant he trusted, reviewed the volumes of data with an increasingly impressed expression, her usually impassive face betraying a hint of surprise. Mr. Davies, she had stated, her voice devoid of emotion, her words measured and precise, in 30 years, I have rarely seen a case so thoroughly documented by the victim. This is not just compelling, it is airtight, a prosecutor's dream. With Eleanor's precise guidance, Rhys began the formal process, initiating the legal machinery that would eventually crush Seraphina's empire of lies. He filed a detailed complaint with the federal financial regulatory authorities, providing them with the initial tranche of his evidence, enough to spark immediate alarm. He ensured the filing was done with the utmost discretion, under sealed orders where possible, to prevent any premature leaks that might tip off Seraphina and give her time to destroy evidence or fabricate counternarratives. He knew she had powerful connections, influential friends in high places, and he wanted to deny her any opportunity to leverage them. The regulatory bodies, seeing the depth and breadth of the fraudulent activities, the sheer scale of the theft, immediately escalated the case to federal investigators, recognizing it was not a simple civil dispute, but a sophisticated, multi-layered criminal enterprise. Simultaneously, Rhys initiated the liquidation of Synapse Solutions, a painful but necessary step, like amputating a gangrenous limb to save the body. While Seraphina paraded his company's collapse as irrefutable proof of his incompetence, her smug pronouncements filling the society pages, Rhys was in fact orchestrating its controlled demolition, managing the fallout with precision. He worked closely with a team of liquidators to ensure that every asset was accounted for, every liability thoroughly documented, every last penny traced. He cooperated fully with independent auditors, allowing them unrestricted access to all legitimate financial records, except for the ones pertaining to Seraphina's illicit activities, which were already safely in the hands of the authorities. This transparency, paradoxically, made him appear even more defeated to the outside world, more overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the collapse, further cementing Seraphina's narrative of his utter failure. Poor Rhys, she'd sigh dramatically to mutual friends over expensive coffees, he's just so lost, so utterly out of his depth. Can't even manage a proper bankruptcy, bless his heart. Rhys allowed Seraphina to bask in her fabricated glory, to soak in the adoration of her sycophants. He attended a few carefully chosen social events where he knew she would be present, playing the role of the broken, introspective tech founder, a man reeling from professional disaster. He listened patiently as she offered him condescending advice, her words laced with thinly veiled pity, as she regaled others with tales of his supposed financial misjudgments and his naive trust. "Rhys, dear, you always were a bit too trusting, weren't you?" she'd say, her painted nails tapping rhythmically on his arm, a hand adorned with a diamond bracelet he suspected was paid for with Synapse funds, his own stolen legacy. He would simply nod, a slight, almost imperceptible tremor in his gaze, a carefully constructed facade of vulnerability that concealed a steel-trap mind. This silence, this apparent acceptance of his fate, was a powerful psychological tool. It reassured Seraphina, confirming her belief that she had won, that she had utterly crushed him, leaving him with no fight left. It allowed her to drop her guard, to become even bolder in her public pronouncements, inadvertently digging her own grave deeper with every self-congratulatory word, every malicious whisper. He continued to meticulously gather any new public statements she made, any further instances of her gloating, her public shaming of him, adding them to his growing file of evidence. Each one was a testament to her malicious intent, a further piece of evidence demonstrating her systematic campaign to defame him, to annihilate his character. He knew these would be crucial in illustrating her pattern of behavior, not just as a financial criminal, but as a character assassin, a woman driven by a need to destroy. He observed her escalating confidence, her increasingly arrogant demeanor, knowing that every step she took further into the spotlight was a step closer to the precipice, to the edge of her own carefully constructed abyss. The curiosity gap for the public was widening daily, a palpable tension in the air. Why was Rhys so quiet? Why wasn't he defending himself against these vicious accusations? To the world, he seemed to accept his fate with a strange passivity, a defeated resignation. But beneath that calm exterior, the machinery of justice was turning, slowly but inexorably, grinding forward with the precision of a finely tuned engine. Rhys was not reacting to Seraphina's narrative, he was writing his own, a silent, devastating counter-narrative, piece by piece, document by document, building a case that would speak for itself. He was not just waiting, he was setting the stage, ensuring that when the curtain finally rose, the performance would be utterly unforgettable, and the audience, along with the star of the show, would be completely unprepared for the shocking reveal. The final act was meticulously planned, every detail considered, and the moment, the perfect confluence of timing and circumstance, was almost at hand. The setting for the grand reveal was meticulously chosen, a testament to Rhys's strategic foresight and his understanding of Seraphina's deep-seated need for public validation, a private gathering organized by Seraphina herself. It was ostensibly a networking event for leaders in the tech and finance community, a glittering assembly of the city's movers and shakers, but in reality, it was another carefully orchestrated opportunity for her to flaunt her alleged success and, more importantly, to publicly put the final, definitive nail in Rhys's coffin. She had specifically invited him, sending a condescending note implying it was an act of generosity, a charitable gesture to allow him to reconnect with the right people, despite his recent setbacks. She wanted him there, a silent, living prop, a defeated figure to highlight her ascendancy, her triumph. Mutual acquaintances, former colleagues who had once admired Rhys, even a few journalists Seraphina had carefully cultivated with exclusive tips and lavish gifts, filled the elegant banquet hall of a prestigious downtown hotel, its chandeliers casting a warm, deceptive glow. The air hummed with anticipation, not for any groundbreaking announcement, but for the subtle, unspoken drama of Rhys's public humiliation. Seraphina, dazzling in a bespoke suit of vibrant sapphire blue that seemed to radiate confidence, took the stage, microphone in hand, her smile wide, almost predatory, her eyes sparkling with unadulterated triumph. "My dearest friends," she began, her voice resonating through the speakers, filling every corner of the opulent room, "thank you for joining me tonight. It has been a truly transformative period, hasn't it? We've all seen, regrettably, how even the most promising ventures can falter, how even the grandest visions can sometimes crumble." She paused, her gaze sweeping pointedly, deliberately, towards Rhys, who stood quietly near the back, observing with an inscrutable expression, his composure unyielding. "And while it pains me to speak of certain failures," she continued, her voice dripping with mock sympathy, a theatrical sigh escaping her lips, "it is a necessary lesson. A lesson in prudence, in oversight, in not allowing one's grand visions to cloud one's judgment regarding the practicalities of business, the harsh realities of the market." A ripple of knowing glances, of subtle nods and whispers, passed through the room. Seraphina was openly referencing Synapse's collapse and, by extension, Rhys's supposed professional demise, reveling in her perceived victory. She was relishing every moment, every subtle shift in the audience's attention, every knowing glance. But tonight, she declared, raising her voice, her tone shifting to one of determined optimism, is about looking forward. It's about celebrating resilience, the ability to adapt, to thrive even when others stumble, even when the path ahead seems uncertain. She launched into a self-congratulatory monologue about her new ventures, her strategic partnerships, all built, she implied, on her superior business acumen and foresight, in stark contrast to Rhys's reckless ambition and his supposed inability to manage. As she approached the crescendo of her performance, her voice reaching a pitch of almost unbearable arrogance, a discreet signal was given, a single, almost imperceptible nod from Rhys towards a technician hidden in the shadows. At that very instant, the large projection screens flanking the stage, which had been displaying Seraphina's sleek company logo, flickered. The logo vanished, replaced by a stark, white background with a single, clear, bold title, Case File, Seraphina Davis, Financial Malfeasance and Fraud. A hush fell over the room, immediate and profound, as if an invisible hand had clamped down on the collective breath of the attendees. Seraphina, mid-sentence, her lips still poised for another self-congratulatory flourish, faltered. Her triumphant smile dissolved into a bewildered frown, her eyes darting nervously towards the screens. What is this?" she stammered, her voice losing its polished edge, a tremor entering it. Before she could fully process the image, before she could even formulate a coherent thought, the first slide appeared. It was a scanned copy of an official, notarized document, the initial complaint filed with the Federal Financial Regulatory Agency, clearly naming Seraphina Davis as the primary subject of a criminal investigation into embezzlement and corporate fraud. Each subsequent slide, projected in crisp, undeniable detail, laid bare the meticulously compiled evidence, forged invoices with inflated figures, shell company bank statements showing transfers of millions of dollars to offshore accounts, damning screenshots of encrypted communications detailing illicit schemes, even a chilling audio transcript of her instructing a junior accountant to falsify records, her voice calm and chillingly methodical. The room erupted into murmurs, then gasps, then a rising tide of horrified exclamations. Faces that had been filled with polite interest, with veiled amusement at Rhys's expense, now contorted with shock and dawning horror. People pointed at the screens, their fingers trembling, whispering furiously, their voices rising in volume. The carefully curated ambience shattered into a cacophony of disbelief, a symphony of scandal. Seraphina's face, usually so composed, so carefully masked, contorted through a rapid series of emotions, initial confusion, then dawning realization that hardened into absolute, incandescent terror. Her eyes darted wildly, frantically seeking an escape, a way to make it stop, a way to erase the damning images before her. But the presentation continued, relentlessly, each slide a hammer blow to her carefully constructed reality. It detailed the exact amount siphoned, the specific dates, the precise bank accounts involved. It even showed a complex, color-coded diagram illustrating the intricate flow of laundered funds through various offshore entities, a diagram Rhys had spent months perfecting with Arthur Vance, making the convoluted scheme horrifyingly clear. Then, a new voice cut through the commotion, calm, authoritative, and utterly chilling in its precision. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated." Two individuals in dark, impeccably tailored suits, their faces grim and unyielding, accompanied by Eleanor Vance, walked purposefully from the back of the room towards the stage, their steps measured and deliberate. They were federal agents. "Ms. Seraphina Davis," one of the agents stated, his voice clear and resonant, amplified by the stage microphone, "you are under arrest for multiple counts of wire fraud, mail fraud, money laundering, and embezzlement, stemming from your activities at Synapse Solutions and related entities." He read her Miranda rights, his voice unwavering, each word a nail in her coffin. Seraphina stood frozen, her jaw slack, her eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and utter, abject panic. The microphone, still clutched in her hand, slipped from her nerveless fingers and clattered to the floor, the sound echoing eerily in the now silent, stunned room. Her carefully constructed world, built on lies and Rhys's trust, was crumbling around her, not with a whimper, but with a thunderous, public crash, witnessed by all who had once admired her. Rhys stepped forward, quietly, emerging from the shadows at the back of the hall, his presence almost spectral. He walked towards the stage, not with aggression or triumph, but with a quiet, solemn dignity, a man completing a necessary, painful task. He paused a few feet from Seraphina, his gaze meeting hers, holding it without wavering. There was no hatred in his eyes, no vindictive satisfaction, just a profound, unsettling clarity, a deep understanding of the truth. "Seraphina," he said, his voice low, a mere whisper audible only to her amidst the stunned chaos, "I merely finished the story you started." Her eyes, filled with a raw, animalistic fear he had never seen before, finally seemed to register his presence, to truly see him. She saw not the broken, ruined man she had publicly scorned, the naive visionary she had manipulated, but the architect of her destruction, calm and composed, standing amidst the ruins of her carefully constructed deception. The realization of the depth of his planning, of his unwavering patience, of how utterly she had underestimated him, how completely she had misjudged his quiet strength, hit her like a physical blow. Her knees buckled, and she would have collapsed if the agents had not already moved swiftly to secure her, their hands firm on her arms. The curtain had fallen on her performance, and risen on Rhys's truth, a truth that left no room for doubt or escape. The aftermath of the reveal was immediate and brutal, a cascading series of dominoes falling with devastating precision, each one echoing the profound shock of the previous. Seraphina's public arrest, captured on smartphone cameras by startled attendees who had once been her sycophants, swiftly became the defining image of her downfall, a viral sensation across all media platforms. The discreet journalists she had invited, hoping for a juicy story of Rhys's public humiliation, instead found themselves sitting on a scoop of unimaginable proportions, a scandal that would dominate headlines for weeks. Within hours, the news exploded across financial and tech media outlets, her meticulously crafted image shattering into a million pieces, her carefully curated reputation utterly obliterated. Seraphina was taken into custody, her protests and frantic denials falling on deaf ears, her attempts to charm or intimidate the federal agents utterly futile. The initial shock gave way to a chilling reality as the full weight of the federal charges pressed down on her, a mountain of evidence that left no room for maneuver. Bail was set at an astronomical sum, reflecting the scale of the alleged embezzlement and the significant flight risk she represented, money she no longer possessed. Her new ventures, which she had so proudly announced just moments before her arrest, evaporated overnight as investors scrambled to distance themselves from a public fraudster, fearing reputational damage and legal repercussions. The strategic partnerships proved to be entirely non-existent or based on fabricated numbers, another layer of her elaborate deception. Her lavish assets, the very symbols of her ill-gotten gains, the designer clothes, the exotic cars, the opulent penthouse she had paraded, were immediately frozen pending forfeiture, leaving her with virtually nothing, a stark contrast to her former life. All her perceived wealth was now evidence or potential restitution for her victims. The guests at the event, once her admiring audience, scattered like leaves in a storm, their initial shock giving way to a collective wave of embarrassment and self-reflection. The polite smiles vanished, replaced by expressions of revulsion and disbelief, a dawning realization of their own unwitting complicity. Many who had once gossiped about Rhys's failure now felt a cold dread, realizing they had been used, manipulated into spreading the narrative of a criminal. Some rushed to delete their social media posts gloating about Rhys's demise, a futile attempt to erase their own complicity, their past judgment. Others, particularly those who had invested even a small sum based on Seraphina's advice or persuasive charm, felt a sickening blend of anger and self-reproach, the sting of betrayal compounded by financial loss. There was widespread shock, followed by a wave of regret from those who had bought into Seraphina's charming facade, who had accepted her narrative without question, blinded by her charisma. The mutual acquaintances who had eagerly listened to her malicious tales now faced the uncomfortable truth that they had been manipulated, their own judgment clouded by Seraphina's cunning, becoming unwitting participants in her scheme. For Rhys, the immediate aftermath was a strange blend of profound exhaustion and a quiet, almost serene satisfaction. He cooperated fully with the federal investigators, providing additional layers of evidence and invaluable insight into Seraphina's complex methods, helping them untangle the remaining threads of her scheme. The liquidators of Synapse Solutions found their work easier, as the true nature of the financial discrepancies became abundantly clear, no longer shrouded by Seraphina's deceptive accounting. The company's remaining legitimate assets were carefully managed to ensure employees received their final dues, every last penny owed, a testament to Rhys's unwavering commitment to his team, even in ruin. He ensured that those who had worked faithfully for Synapse were not left behind in the wreckage of Seraphina's greed. Messages began to trickle in, a slow but steady stream, apologies from former colleagues who had believed Seraphina's lies, expressions of profound admiration from others who had silently wondered about Rhys's extraordinary composure, his quiet strength. "We should have known," one former board member confessed in a contrite email, his words heavy with regret. "Your dedication was always unquestionable, and her extravagance, it never quite added up. We just chose to believe the easier story, the one that required less thought." Rhys responded to few, understanding that genuine vindication was not about public declarations of superiority, but about the quiet, personal restoration of truth, a silent victory. The psychological impact on Seraphina was profound and absolute. Stripped of her public image, her financial resources, and her carefully constructed web of lies, she was a hollow shell, a mere shadow of her former self. The charismatic, manipulative woman had dissolved into a terrified, cornered animal, her veneer of sophistication completely gone. Her initial bluster in custody, her attempts to assert dominance, quickly faded into a chilling silence, punctuated by desperate pleas to her lawyers, who found themselves facing an unassailable mountain of evidence that left no room for defense. Her attempts to deflect blame, to paint Rhys as a vindictive ex-husband, a man consumed by bitterness, were met with cold, hard facts, with irrefutable digital trails and bank statements. The narrative she had so meticulously built, of Rhys as the failure, herself as the savvy survivor, the phoenix rising from his ashes, was utterly, irrevocably inverted. She was no longer the victor, she was the defeated, exposed and alone, facing the full, unyielding force of the legal system she had so brazenly defied for years. The fall was not merely financial or social, it was a complete and utter annihilation of her identity, a final, crushing blow to her carefully crafted ego. Months turned into a year, then two, the passage of time marked by the quiet hum of justice. The wheels of justice, though slow and deliberate, ground inexorably forward, leaving no stone unturned. Seraphina's trial was swift and definitive, a foregone conclusion. Faced with an overwhelming mountain of evidence, and the compelling testimony of numerous former Synapse employees who came forward after Rhys's revelation, now emboldened by the truth, she eventually pleaded guilty to multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement in exchange for a slightly reduced sentence. She was sentenced to a substantial prison term, a just recompense for the years of deceit and the millions she had stolen, a period of incarceration that would strip her of the very freedom she had so abused. The majority of her ill-gotten gains, once traced through the labyrinthine network of offshore accounts, were successfully recovered and used for restitution to victims and creditors, including the remaining liabilities of Synapse Solutions, ensuring that those who had been wronged received some measure of justice. Rhys, in the time following the legal proceedings, had deliberately stepped away from the public eye. He found solace in solitude, in the quiet pursuit of knowledge, and in rebuilding his life on a foundation of unshakable integrity, far removed from the glitz and grime of the tech world he had once inhabited. He didn't seek revenge or gloat over Seraphina's fate, such emotions held no power over him anymore. His vindication was internal, a profound sense of peace derived from having exposed the truth and ensured justice was served, a quiet triumph of principle. He spent time hiking in national parks, rediscovering the simple, unadorned beauty of nature, the quiet majesty of mountains and forests, something he had neglected during his years of relentless work and silent suffering. He volunteered at a local tech incubator, mentoring young, ethical entrepreneurs, sharing his hard-won wisdom about the importance of character, transparency, and integrity in business, cautioning them against the pitfalls of unchecked ambition. He did not launch another company immediately. The thought of building another empire held little appeal. Instead, he channeled his intellectual curiosity into fundamental research, working on open-source AI projects that focused on ethical data privacy and decentralized trust systems, technologies that truly aimed to benefit humanity. He found a new, deeper purpose in contributing to the common good, rather than chasing corporate empires or personal wealth. His name, once dragged through the mud by Seraphina, was now spoken with quiet respect, a testament to his resilience. He became known not just as a brilliant technologist, but as a man of profound resilience and unwavering integrity, who had navigated a personal and professional betrayal with remarkable dignity and quiet strength. He rebuilt his life, not by seeking external validation or public acclaim, but by cultivating internal peace and purpose, finding fulfillment in genuine contribution. The experience had transformed him utterly. The ambitious, perhaps naive, visionary had evolved into a man of profound wisdom, tempered by fire. He understood now that true power lay not in accumulation, but in truth, not in control over others, but in self-mastery and inner peace. The pain of the past was not forgotten, but it had been transmuted into strength, a deeper understanding of human nature, and an unshakable belief in the eventual triumph of justice, no matter how long it took. His story became a quiet legend in certain circles, a testament to the fact that even in the face of profound betrayal and public humiliation, quiet resilience, meticulous preparation, and an unwavering commitment to truth can ultimately prevail. It served as a powerful reminder that while some may revel in the apparent downfall of others, believing their fabricated narratives to be the final word, the universe often has a different plan, a different arc for justice. True justice does not always erupt in a sudden explosion of anger or a public spectacle of vengeance, but often unfolds with the quiet, relentless precision of a well-laid strategy, a meticulously executed plan. It is a lesson in patience, in the power of unseen forces, and the profound truth that integrity, though sometimes tested in the crucible of adversity, will always, eventually, shine brightest, casting out the shadows of deceit. This story of Rhys and Seraphina is just one of many tales of justice, resilience, and life lessons that we share on this channel. If you found yourself captivated by Rhys's quiet strength and Seraphina's dramatic downfall, then you'll find plenty more to ponder and learn from in our other videos. Don't miss out on these powerful narratives. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you're always the first to know when a new story of triumph over adversity, or the inevitable reckoning of injustice, is released. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever faced a situation where someone tried to revel in your perceived downfall, only for the truth to eventually come to light? Or, perhaps, have you witnessed someone's public celebration of another's misfortune lead directly to their own undoing? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Your insights and stories are invaluable, and we love hearing how these narratives resonate with your own lives.